Are you suggesting that, I get it, I understand that if the landlord improves the space, they can get higher rent and get a different use. I understand that. But what are you asking if a mixed-use building is possible? Because we all think I don't think it is. I think that's not something that people really want to do, although some of us do it. I think it's difficult, just from some of the things you said. The tax on the building in terms of having that many people makes it difficult.
So are you saying that could we build a building that was a state-of-the-art building where you could get people in and out and they could be manufacturing? Would that be viable?
I think that could be viable. I think that idea is fine. I think if you wanted to have a building that has a consistent use, I think that there's plenty of examples of that in the city that works fine. I think, are you asking about a mixed-use building? Or?
Yeah, well, the subject is mixed use, meaning in simple terms, can you have a building, as with the picture, where you have office tenants and factory tenants coexisting?
You know,
You
can I
can.
interrupt for a
Yes, go
second?
ahead.
315 West 36th Street is a mixed-use building. It has a separate entrance for tenants and a separate entrance for factories or businesses. And we could go take a look because my knitter is in that building, so I go there all the time. And the door person sits in the middle, and he has windows on both sides, and he collects packages.
So the norm in the industry, if we talk to factory owners, is, oh my God, the lobby is renovated. At that moment, they start to see from the top floor down, the building turn over to office. And the factories literally get moved to lower floors until on successive one-year leases until they're out. And that's how a building turns over. I'm really referring to that. I mean, that's how one upgrades a building. We take certain use and move it out, and we replace it with other higher value use.
That's right. He's right. He's right.
Have I misobserved the last 20 years?
If you need a job, you know where to come. I'm happy to get you right in there. But I think you should point out that happens in buildings that have no matter what use they are. That happens to people out of the Garment Center who want to do the same thing with their buildings. Someone may take a building on Madison Avenue and 53rd Street and decide that they're going to do the lobby and do the elevators and do all these things and do the exact same things. Like, I don't think that idea is germane to the Garment Center. It's just real estate in general, that people want to make it better and sell it for more. Like this, I don't think that's not strange. I mean, that's normal for all of us.
I think the issue is not whether it's feasible, physically feasible, architecturally feasible to have a mixed-use building. The issue is the finances, and how do you have management decision that's really in the interest of the tenants? Like, if you knew that the building wasn't going to completely turn over, an upgrade would be fine. The issue is whether it's a sign or whether it's a cue that you're out of there, that you're history. And what I'm suggesting is that under the existing model, that's what happens. That's correct. And so that's why, as Madeline said, we need these new models where the industry has a stake, where the industry is the manager of that building, so that they can make a decision. They need a certain rent to sustain the building, but then they also have a mission, which is to sustain the industry.
Or the landlords in the collective say, we want manufacturing in this area. And they say, we have a 15-story building, we want 2 or 3 floors to be manufacturing. And it's okay that those floors may receive a different kind of upgrade than others. And literally those buildings can be branded throughout the area so that we still have the texture of manufacturing in the district, and it's not a big office park.
Joe, wasn't that what part of the original 1987 zoning? Wasn't
Exactly.
That's exactly what it did, and that's what people are saying is not working.
And maybe we scale it back so that instead of having half of the use of a building, you have a quarter or you have a tenth, and you celebrate that tenth with branding, saying this is a manufacturing district. I think a lot of office tenants would kind of appreciate to be around that activity because it adds texture. I mean, office buildings are boring.
I'd like to.
Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
I'd like to just. I think that there are different models that one could use, whether it's a single building, whether it's a few buildings, whether it's a little bit in this building, a little bit in that building. I think really the question is, how do we stabilize the business in the Garment Center? Because I think that if there were a robust amount of designers that wanted to use the Garment Center, which is not necessarily the case now. We talk very optimistically about the emerging designer who does use the Garment Center, but most established designers do not use the Garment Center. And I do believe strongly that, again, I get back to the law of supply and demand, that for a lot of the property owners, I'm not defending anybody here, but a property owner who sees that there is a very robust need for manufacturing space or showroom space or ancillary office space to showroom or factory space might be more interested in fixing up a building or fixing up some space, and Eric, you tell me if I'm wrong here, because they see that there's a need there. And that need is unclear. I mean, there has been an 8% decline in manufacturing in New York.
You're talking about all the boroughs?
In everywhere.
Okay.
Manufacturing in the United States, there's a downward trend. It looks possibly now that trend may be settling in. It's hard to know if it's going to go down a little bit, maybe up a little bit. We have seen in New York a slight increase over the last 10, 20 years in design, but it isn't enough to make everybody start to say, oh, let's get rid of office, let's all go back to manufacturing. So again, it's great to say, okay, what do we do about the property, but really, what do we do about the business? And that, I think, is the first question at hand.
I think,
Yeah, Edgar.
I think we may be overcomplicating the situation somewhat. Stan, and I'm sure others in the hall will remember, and he's referred to 1987. Well, in 1987, when the zoning law was passed under then Mayor Ed Koch, there actually was 6 million square feet that were zoned. And it was not complicated at all. Okay, I was part of that process, and we went to Ed Koch and said, this is what this industry needs, and we made the argument along with some owners. And it was not difficult to get passed. I think the question is, and we're talking about new models, different models, all right? I think the bottom line is, all right, and the question is, A, do we want a garment center in this city?
Yes.
B, do we
That's
want to
the
hear
first question.
where it's historically been? And if the answer to that is yes, and I think we all can agree that 2011 is not what 1987 was, but what is it today? And I think what we got to try to figure out, what we've been wrestling with for a number of years, but what is the right number? How much square feet do we need? We clearly understand the dynamics, okay, of the apparel industry and the garment center in terms of what's needed. The symmetry that's there between the designer and the factory and the button guy and the hanger guy. And this is what's made this industry work for so many years. Now, we know we don't have the thousands of workers and certainly the hundreds or thousands of businesses that existed. And so it's a reduced environment. Do we still need the 6 million square feet? Well, I'm probably one of the last people that would say, no, we don't. But the reality is that we don't need the 6 million square feet. So the question is, what do we need? How do we get there? You know, to be fair to the property owners, to be fair to this industry, and certainly to be able to provide a decent place for workers to be able to work. But we can't do that, right, if the space isn't there. And one of the things, unfortunately, that has happened over the years, there's just been a lot of violations and very little has happened as a result of the violation of the zoning issues. But I think one of the things that we got to get to, which is the heart of the matter, okay, how much space do we really need? You know, where is it sort of located, and how do we go about working out a plan that is fair and equitable for everybody?
Well, I'll ask that question of the rest of the panel. Do you think when you come to numbers like that, that's the answer? He's talking about coming to, I know when the first thing first came to us, everybody said, well, 600 to 100,000 square feet, 500. Is a number the answer, or is what you saw from the trust? Is there something else here besides numbers that we can build on?
The reason that the trust did the study is because we couldn't answer that question.
Yes.
That was when we wrote to them and applied for a study to be made. And personally, I put my faith in phase 2, the study that they're going to do next, because I think that it may illuminate and identify the sweet spot in the rent structure that can help sustain the neighborhood, the community, and our industry. But, you know, it takes a lot of faith, but it also takes a lot of time. However, until we can answer those questions, you know, we can't make a plan. We don't really know.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would say it has to be a two-part or there's two parts to that answer. The first is the numbers, how many square feet do you need?
Right.
But the second is, how is that space controlled? How is that space owned? You can make all the zoning changes you want, and I promise you, in a couple of years after the next building cycle, we'll all be back here on stage, hopefully, you know, having the same debate. So we've got to move away from the control through zoning to a different model for control, which I think has to do with the industry owning the space.
On a sort of up note, Joe, could you tell some of the people, some of the designers who are making things in New York?
I mean, we have a long list. Certainly all of the
I think you'll
emerging
be
designers.
surprised.
All
I
of
think
the
they will, yeah.
emerging designers are here in the city. And then the well-knowns that, you know, the Yolis of the world, the Carolina Herreras of the world, the Oscars, the Bill Blass licensing. These designers are alive and well. And what they are making is the very high end, that which matters most, where they say, this is the line where the guy's name is on the door. And that's the product that is being made here. And they're all names that we know as well as the new, the Jason Wu's, the Alexander Wangs,
How about stores? Are there any stores?
And it's interesting you bring up retail. So the private label business, private label is retail. Saks has 30% of the clothes that Saks sells are under its own label. And so in fact, they are manufacturers. They
That's
also,
very, very strong. That's very good. Yeah.
And the retailer, I think, if you have a made in Manhattan, and I know J.Lo, not 2002, they kind of own that, but if you do made in Manhattan, we can really appeal to the retailers because the retailers are okay with my Made in Manhattan week. It's a capsule collection. They're not committing their entire clothing inventory to where it is made. I think a brand may be reluctant to say, I am made in Manhattan, we make our clothes in Manhattan, because they're managing a portfolio of resources. And I'm generalizing, but I don't think a brand wants to associate its sourcing entirely with one location, putting all your eggs in one basket. Whereas the retailer, I think there's an opportunity to create demand at the retail level, saying, here's a capsule collection made in New York. It's exciting and the consumer cares about that. And we need to get that out there. And I'd like to see our industry, and I'd like to see the city. The city is very good at pulling multi-parties together. Pull the parties together. Let's get the retailers together with the manufacturers, together with the brands, with the designers, to develop product for consumer that is celebrating manufacturing in the city.
It's never been the nature, I'm sure you all know, being in the business as long as we have been, for everybody to pull together. You know, when 498 and 530 and 550 were built, everybody had their little corner, their little cocoon, and at night you used to wait to see who closed up last, because nobody wanted to know who was there. I think that attitude was the way we grew up, and it can't be that way. I think what you say about stores starting to build collections back here is probably the most important thing that you can say, because that's what Madeline was talking about. That's the kind of change that's necessary. If they believe in it, the designers will start to believe in it. Somebody asked me, why isn't the garment district sexy? One of your real estate people. It's not a sexy place to be. He asked me, why did the meatpacking district become sexy? I ask you that question. Why did it become sexy and we didn't? Ha!
I like the idea that you think I'm the expert on
Yeah,
sexy.
well, I do.
appreciate that.
I look straight at you. I look straight at you. Look at that suit and the way he's toned out there. God.
Well, I think one thing is, what happens
You were at those meetings when they screamed at me,
I
why
probably
isn't
asked
it
you.
sexy?
I probably asked you. Look, I think in some sense my theory has always been that the fashion center should be the coolest and hippest place
Right.
in New York.
That's
I mean,
a better
that's
word.
what I said, and I don't understand why it's not, and I think we should really focus on that. So one of the problems we have is the retail, is that retail-wise, we don't really do a great job retail-wise there. So what can we do about it? Well, the highest retail rents in New York City are in Times Square. And that's 3-4 blocks away. And we don't do anything to get the consumer that comes to Times Square to do anything in our district at all. I can tell you, you can rent store space, small, 2,000 feet in Times Square for, I don't know, $2,000 a foot. You can rent the same space in the Garment Center for $40 a foot. It is 3 blocks away on the same avenue. I mean, that makes no sense at all. So we do nothing to get that consumer base down, to basically make the retail, make the faces of our buildings look better. So maybe that would make it sexier. Obviously, what is it that makes meatpacking sexy? Is it what's on the 8th floor? Is it what's on the 10th floor in any of those buildings? Does anyone know what's on the 10th floor in any of those buildings? I don't even know what's on
There
the
is
10th
no
floor.
10th floor.
No 10th floor. It's what's in the retail is what makes it
Well,
sexy. It's the reason we know it.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think